before we get to 11, and we're going to skip most of 11, because I'll tell you, I don't have a dogmatic view on what to do with that, but in 10:18, let's do the bit about the angel appearing here. I'll read 18 of chapter 10 of Daniel, reading from the New American Standard Version. Any version will do. We have a paraphrase version among us this morning too. So 18 says this: "Then this one with human appearance touched me again and strengthened me."
He said, "O man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage and be courageous." Now as soon as he spoke to me, I received strength and said, "May my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me."
"Do you know," he asked, "why I have come to you? Soon I must fight the prince of Persia again. When I leave, the prince of Greece will come."
21.
"However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces, except Michael, your friend."
Okay, it's fascinating. There's inter-angelic warfare going on here, clearly. You have evil angels and you have good angels. And you have texts in the Bible which suggest that nations have certain angels appointed over them, Michael over Israel, and so on. That's not a problem. There's always God who is ultimately in charge, that's quite clear. Then the holy angels, who are immortal, there's no reason to think they're going to fail. The present holy angels have immortality, they have life forever. They're not going to go wrong now, there's nothing to suggest that. However, there is an angelic element which did go wrong. That produced the Satan, the external Satan, who came up to Jesus in the wilderness to tempt him. It wasn't his own heart twisting scriptures, that's impossible. So here you have a little glimpse of it, and you've got one angel opposing another, and then the good angel comes into play to assist in the fight. And if you're talking to your Jehovah's Witness friends at the door, you will always use chapter 10, verse 13. "The prince of that kingdom, Persia, was withstanding me for 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief angels." Now, Jesus is not one of a category. This person, Michael, is one of the chief princes. Princes is the word for angels in the book of Daniel. That absolutely excludes Jesus being Michael, you see? He's not an angel. You can't be a human and an angel. You can be pre-human as an angel, then you're really always an angel. And the Jehovah's Witnesses say that at the baptism of Jesus, God put the memory of his being Michael back on him. Well, where does it say that? So you've got a lot of work to do at the door to suggest very gently and very kindly, no, to which of the angels did God ever say you're mine? He never said that. He never ever said that you're begotten, that's in the womb of a Mother Mary in this case. He never said that to an angel, so that would work through that particular issue. I love this here, the strengthening. Isn't there a passage, Sarah, maybe you could find it, or Carlos could find it, in Luke, is it in Luke's Gospel, where an angel showed up to strengthen Jesus? You'll find it very much.
In the garden.
In the garden. What is that, in Luke? I don't have it marked here.
Yeah, Luke 22:43.
Good, what does that say?
"An angel from heaven appeared to Jesus and strengthened
Isn't
him."
that wonderful? So angels are now in the business of strengthening human beings. They can impart spirit, let's say. Why not? They can show up and they can actually impart spirit to human beings, in this case Daniel.
Which begs the question, if Jesus was God or an
Well,
angel, why did he need strengthening
well,
from another angel?
No, he doesn't. That's out of the question. Jesus is not an angel, period. That's absolutely out of the question. He's got to be a man to be a descendant of David. You cannot be older than your own ancestor. That doesn't make much sense. The Messiah has to be the son of David, must be a descendant of David, a lineal, biological descendant of King David. He has to be that to qualify. That's rather straightforward. Now, there are some translation problems, especially in your Bibles, where it says that Jesus went back to the Father. That's a falsehood. No text says that Jesus went back to the Father. And in John 17:5, it comes up all the time, "Give me now the glory which I had with you." There you go. Wait a minute. The glory which I had with you in the very context in John 17:22 and 24, that same glory that Jesus asked for, he had already given to you who weren't even born. It's glory in prospect. Give me now, as a result of the end of my ministry, Jesus says, the glory which I had in your great plan, envisaged for me in your great plan. That's beautiful. So look out for a few mistranslations. Also in John 1:15 you have Jesus saying that he was before John the Baptist. Not necessarily at all. They're equivocating on an ambiguous word in Greek. Not necessarily before in time. How about superior? The one who was behind me, John the Baptist says, the one who was following me, Jesus, was apparently at first attached to John the Baptist, has now moved ahead of me because he was always my superior. Not he existed before I did. That's just impossible. So in the Gospel of John, there are some mistranslations. Colossians 1, some problematic translations. But we have good authorities. James Dunn particularly, who can help us with all of that detail. All right, so here the angel then is strengthening Daniel and in giving him the writing of truth. Now, I'll tell you right away, this next chapter has a difficulty. I haven't solved all the problems of Daniel. I don't know that anybody has, particularly. So here's the issue, and I don't think we need to read all of chapter 11. We start, though, with something that's familiar to you, I should say. 11:1. Who has 11:1? Me? Somebody?
I'll read it.
Right, 11:1.
Now then, I will read.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask the question.
Yes, ma'am. See?
So it says one resembling a human being, and
Yes.
so with human appearance. So that's an angel.
Yes.
And then he says there's no one that stands firm except Michael, another angel. So
Yes.
we're talking two angels here.
Must be.
We don't
Two
know.
archangels.
Yeah.
Two
Do we know
archangels.
who this angel is?
Almost certainly Gabriel. Gabriel is the
Yeah.
one that does the work of giving stuff in the book of
Yeah,
Daniel.
most people think it's
Most
Gabriel.
people think it would be
Appeared to
Gabriel.
Mary, too,
Right.
Yeah,
So we have, in the Bible we have Michael and Gabriel as archangels. There are 7 in Judaism. The other 5 are not mentioned
Why
here.
wouldn't they be standing firmly too, the other archangels?
Oh, I'm sure they were. They're not evil angels. The archangels are all holy.
Right. But it just said there isn't anyone standing firmly except.
Okay.
Why was there no one?
Okay, good
Why
point.
aren't,
Yeah.
why aren't the other
They were busy.
angels standing with them
Yes.
too?
Good point.
They have other angelic
Other
duties.
business.
Like Tom's answer there, they were doing other things. Whatever. That's lovely.
10, 16
That's great.
21, where we just read.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Michael, your
Nice.
prince, except Michael, your prince, your angel. So Michael is the one that is particularly appointed to look after Israel, and other nations can have angels in charge of them. Now, there are also evil angels, so there's always this balance between what God permits and what these good or bad angels can do.
That's why this battle is
That's
going on.
That's why the
I mean,
battle's
you're
going
talking
on.
about a battle
Right.
that's beyond just on earth.
Right.
It's,
There's a very interesting passage, as you know, where David was tempted to number the troops. Somebody wrote and said, why would that be a sin? And the answer is that David was too military at this point. He's numbering the troops to see if he can go to war. That wasn't a good thing. The one account says God tempted him. God tested him, right? God cannot tempt anybody. He can test. God cannot lure you into evil, but he can test you. The devil, however, can lure you into evil. So that's quite clear that God, in one account, tested David to see what he would do. And numbering the troops, I wondered about it. I looked it all up in the commentators this week. Why is that a bad thing? Because you're planning to go to war. Don't do it. That wasn't the time for anybody to go to war. So that would be the sin. And a whole lot of people died for David's sin. Watch out. Because for the leaders getting it wrong. That's awful. So the other account says that Satan did this activity. Well, that's not a problem. God allowed Satan to do this. God will only allow Satan within certain limits, right? You cannot be tested beyond what you can stand. That's the guarantee. However, you can always be praying, don't lead us into trial. Don't let us be drawn away by Satan. Please don't do that. Let me be alert so I don't fall into the traps of the devil. Okay, so that's an interesting thing there for me.
And that's First Chronicles
Yes.
21:1.
And the parallel is in 1 Samuel,
Uh,
1 Chronicles 21:1.
yeah, somewhere.
And what's the parallel?
2 Samuel
2 Samuel
24:1.
24.
2 Samuel 20.
Not a contradiction. God permits Satan to do the testing there. And the point would be that you shouldn't be counting your army. It suggests, I'm ready, God, and, bash a few other nations. That wasn't what God wanted done then. So there was a huge punishment for that error that David made. Okay, then we get to, have we got my Lord there, the word my Lord? 19. Yes, I want to comment that. I received strength, and I said, may my Lord speak. You see the little L on there, don't you? I hope you don't have a capital L. My Lord, right? One of my favorite topics. 195 times in the Bible you have Adoni. Everybody should know this Hebrew word. It's the only Hebrew word you need to know, beyond Yahweh, how we pronounce that. We don't know how to pronounce it. Doesn't matter. Jehovah, Yahweh, it doesn't matter. It makes no fuss about that in the New Testament. However, Adoni you should know. Adoni is my Lord, little L, my master, my boss. So the Jews talk about the King Messiah a lot. The King Messiah, that's exactly right. He's the King Messiah. We talk about Luke 2:11, marvelous verse. The Messiah Lord got born. So Adoni occurs 195 times precisely. With our machines these days, we can measure and count all that with great ease. Here's one of them. Either an angel is my Lord, or a superior human. Never, ever, ever, ever is God called Adoni. Not once. They're very careful to distinguishing God and man. So guess what they did with Psalm 110:1, which is the most often quoted verse in the Bible by far in terms of Old Testament verses in the New. It's the John 3:16. It's the refrigerator verse. It's the golden thread verse, which you must get right. There you have an oracle of Yahweh, Jehovah, directed to my Lord, little L, Adoni. How come 194 times that word was given correctly, little L, and just on that one verse only, your translation misled you? Put a capital L on there, and if it was a capital L, if it really should be a capital L, then behind it would be the word Adonai, which is the Lord God. This is not difficult, though. You need to be armed with this because it's mind-bogglingly interesting to me. So that is God and man in Psalm 110:1. God and Adoni, 195 times altogether. Not deity. That's God speaking to not God. God speaking to man. Isn't that beautiful? So the Bible, you can say to your friends with confidence, all about God and man. It's not about God and God. Much less about God and God and God. That's what you're helping people to see. So this is a typical then address to angels. 10 of those 195 times are addressed to angels. Otherwise, the rest of them are human superiors, particularly the king. Very frequently, Adoni HaMelech. That's my Lord the King, my Lord the King, His Majesty. So you can think of Jesus as His Majesty King Jesus. That's exactly right. His Majesty King Jesus. He's the Messiah of Israel, the Messiah of the world. None of this ought to have been lost but under the muddle. And you know in politics about possible muddles, don't you? Everybody seems to think governments are unwieldy things often. They get in a muddle. Well, guess what? The church got in a muddle from the 2nd century onwards. That's sad, but we're trying to get that straightened out. Okay, now in chapter 11, who's going to read verse 1? Did we read verse 1?
Well, it's my turn.
Oh, your turn, please.
In the first year of Darius the Mede, I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him.
Okay. So I'm going to do verse 2. Verse 11, 2.
It's not there.
11, 2.
You go ahead.
And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a 4th will gain more riches than all of them. As soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece. Verse 3.
And a mighty king will arise, and he will rule with great authority and do as he pleases.
No sooner shall he appear than his kingdom shall be broken and divided in 4 directions under heaven, but not among his descendants, or in keeping with his mighty rule, for his kingdom shall be torn to pieces and belong to others.
Okay. I hope that you remember from the previous chapters of Daniel this notion of Alexander the Great, goat, Greece, right? Before that, Medo-Persia, before that Babylon, right? The basic outline you keep in your head is this. First of all, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, Alexander the Great being the chief leader. Most commentators see that clearly in the pattern of Daniel's prophecies. And you see it again here. Medo-Persia is replaced by a mighty king. This is Greece, which was Alexander the Great, otherwise the goat in chapter 8, right? It's very easy, GGG. Now you'll notice again that that kingdom of Greece was divided into 4. We had that in chapter 8 also. So you've got Nebuchadnezzar, Medo-Persia, you've got Greece, and it then divides into 4. Now here's the problem I think nobody understands fully. The rest of this chapter, not all of it, most of it, is a discussion of 2 of those 4. King of the north, king of the south, right? So Alexander the Great dies of wine, women, and song at the age of 33, weeping because there was no more world to conquer. Poor guy. How was it?
He was epileptic.
Was he too? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, tragic way to end your life. And then the kingdom is divided into 4. We know that happened in history too. 4 divisions of Alexander's great Greek kingdom. Now 2 of them are singled out here. Now here's the issue for all Bible prophecies, prophetic studies, prophecy students. What do we do with verse 5 onwards? Then the king of the south will grow strong, and verse 6 all the way through to verse 20. Is this history or is this prophecy? It's an open question. It's very difficult to say. I'll tell you why it's hard to say, because Jesus, our rabbi, does not quote these verses, but guess what? He does quote about the abomination of desolation. Right, that's your key. Rabbi Jesus says, in the future, when you see the AFD standing where he ought not to, then flee to the hills if you're in Israel. Well, that takes you back to verse 31. Just glance ahead in chapter 11. Verse 31, in his place a despicable person will arise, on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred, but he will come in a time of tranquility. I might add, when they're saying peace and peace, perhaps, as Paul said.
21, right?
21.
Oh,
21. Sorry, did I say 31?
yes.
21. Okay, 21 on. Sees the king divine tree. Now, the story continues with this evil guy. 23, an alliance is made with him. And down there in 29, at an appointed time, he, the same he, will return, come into the south, but this last time not be like the first time. Ships from the west, Kittim would be Cyprus, the west of Israel, will come. And verse 31, now we feel, Jesus, now I'm hearing you, right? Verse 31, forces from this king of the north will arise, desecrate the sanctuary, do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation. With confidence I can say Jesus read that as future. But did he read the whole of verse 5 onwards as future too? It's an open question for me. It could be, I would like to think not, because I don't want to think the second coming is miles off yet. So that remains an open question. Let's suppose he read it in our, for me personally, preferred sense, then at least from verse 21, this final evil guy would be the Antichrist. You with me? In 21, this final evil guy is awful, and an alliance is made with him. That sounds awfully like the New Testament material, a covenant made with the Antichrist. And finally then, at the appointed time, 29, he returns, and 31, he sets up the AFD. So is that clear? I would leave open as to what we do with all of the comings and goings of the King of the South, King of the North. That certainly has some parallel in history. But whether it would be repeated, I don't know. King of the South would be Egypt. King of the North would be Syria, Iraq, even Turkey, that area, north, Assyria particularly, Iraq, Iran, Turkey. Very much in the news, as you know, these days. So I'll leave that open until somebody comes up with a completely definitive answer. And I'm talking about the history of prophecy studies here. B.W. Newton, Tregelles, the so-called biblical critic, they worked at this in the 1800s very, very hard, all this stuff. They worked at it, wrote books on it. So I'll leave that open and further comment later on if we get more light on it.
If I could add
yes.
here that Josephus is well known.
Yep.
records that Alexander was shown the prophecies of Daniel.
Yes, that's right.
So that gives you a good historical anchor
It does.
as
Yes.
to when Daniel was written.
Yes. That's right.
So,
Yes, we didn't mention that. There is
so
a...
Josephus says, just to comment, he
Right.
says that when he offered sacrifice to God,
Yes,
according to the priest of the temple, so this is when Alexander entered the temple,
yes.
he treated them well.
Okay.
So as a result, the priests showed him the book of Daniel
Yes.
and showed him how one of the Greeks should destroy
Mhm.
the Persians because he
Interesting.
was on his way to
Yep. That's all
getting rid
history.
of
We knew that.
barrier.
Good.
And he supposed, Alexander supposed that Daniel was talking about him.
Yep.
And he was glad, and he didn't destroy the temple.
No, that's an interesting point. Okay. Certainly then we're saying that the abomination of desolation, which is in 31, the sort of end point of this final king of the north, then that would have to be future because Jesus spoke of the abomination of desolation as future. So what I can say with confidence, though, is the Antichrist is the king of the north. He's not the king of the west. So the idea of Europe being involved with Herr Strauss, as we were once taught was the Antichrist in Germany, is very unlikely to be true. That would be the king of the west. That would be ships from Kittim, the west, but not the king of the north. The king of the north would be Middle Eastern and north of Israel. That seems to be right. So let's pick it up then at 21, right, reading about this final evil person. Who's got 21? Okay.
In his place, a despicable person will arise, on whom the honor of kingship has not been conferred. But he will come in a time of tranquility and seize the kingdom by intrigue.
The overflowing forces will be flooded away before him and shattered, and also the prince of the covenant.
Mhm.
By making deceitful promises, he will make various alliances.
Mm.
With a mere handful of followers, he will become strong.
Interesting. In a time of tranquility, he will enter the richest parts of the realm, accomplish what his fathers never did, nor his ancestors. He will distribute plunder, booty, and possessions among them. He will devise his schemes against strongholds, but only for a time.
He will stir up his strength and courage against the king of the south with a large army. So the king of the south will mobilize an extremely large and mighty army for war, but he will not stand, for schemes will be devised against him.
And even his table companions shall seek to destroy him. His army shall be overwhelmed, and many shall be struck down.
27.
As for both kings, their hearts will be intent on evil, and they will speak lies to each other at the same table,
Mhm.
but it will not succeed, for the end is still to come at the appointed time.
28.
Then he will return to his land with much plunder, but his heart will be set against the holy covenant,
Mhm.
and he will take action and then return to his own land.
29.
Then at the appointed time, he will once again invade the south. But this time the result will be different.
For ships of Kittim will come against him. Therefore he will be disheartened and will return and become enraged at the Holy Covenant and take action. So he will come back and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant.
Forces from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up the abomination of desolation.
Okay, let's pause right there. You see, that is certainly something that Jesus mentioned. Exactly where you begin the prophecy is the interesting point here. We'll comment on Sir Isaac Newton, who was not, may I say, as good in Hebrew as he was in things to do with the cosmos, and wanting Rome to be the fourth kingdom. He mistranslated the verse here. I always found this rather interesting. It says, forces from him, the king of the north. Forces from him, the king of the north, the only subject in the story. And Isaac Newton didn't like that. You see, the Pope and the West was supposed to be the Antichrist. So he translated it as forces after him. In other words, beyond the king of the north comes Rome. That's wrong. That's been noted by many commentators. Do not imagine that John Milton, Isaac Newton, brilliant people as they were not necessarily quite as well equipped as we are, by the way, with these machines. So that's an interesting point to me. This is definitely the king of the north. the king of the north, which would not be west, would not be Rome. Now, that Europe can be involved in all this, that's possible, I don't know. But certainly I can tell you that the king of the north is the bad guy here. And didn't you hear some echoes of the New Testament? When they say peace, peace, Paul said, then sudden destruction comes upon them. There's a secrecy about this final bad guy, and he's enraged at the covenant. Doesn't that remind you of the beast? In the book of Revelation, there's a single beast, and he's part of a tenfold beast empire. So that I can say with confidence will be a tenfold kingdom at the end, because Jesus is going to fight those 10 kings when he comes. And that tenfold kingdom is almost certainly Psalm 83, in your notes, Psalm 83, which has a list of 10 Middle Eastern countries with that Syria key, and 10 exactly. And they have one mind, and that reminds us of Revelation. They all have one mind, and they work together to fight Jesus when he comes back. That part I think is sure. But exactly where we come into prophecy and leave history is not clear to me. I know Tom's thought about a lot of this, and maybe has these are open questions that are very interesting to discuss. But certainly we can say the abomination of desolation is here, and smooth words he will turn to godlessness in verse 32, those who act wickedly towards the covenant. So it looks to me as though you must have a rebuilt temple of some sort. That's the beginning of the Jewish story. Some of our friends in the Abrahamic faith are not keen on the idea of a temple. They say, well, what meaning has a temple to us? They miss the point. The temple, a building in Israel, is part of the beginning of the Jewish story. You all know that there's going to be a restoration of now blinded Jews in the kingdom. Not every Jew just because he's a Jew, but because God has not forgotten the lineal descendants of Israel, right? He's not forgotten them. Yes, they're blinded. This is Romans 9 to 11. They're blinded. They're not seeing it now. But through the Great Tribulation, a converted collective whole of now blinded, what we would call Jews, will come to see the light. You see? That's quite clear. Now, for that to happen, a temple in Israel would be the beginning of the story. That's the Jewish story, if you like. It's not going to affect you. You don't have to go and pray in that temple. You could, I suppose. Doesn't matter. But that's part of the Jewish story. Now, I've said to my friends in the Abrahamic faith, don't you see that's part of the Jewish story which they believe in. They do believe in the restoration of Israel in the kingdom, but they don't believe in a future future temple before that kingdom. And it occurred to me one time when we were discussing these things, this is part of the Jewish story. You've got a covenant made with Israel, the nation, by a bad guy, who's a good guy to start with. Halfway through that 70th week, then, on this thesis, he turns into a beast. And then the Great Tribulation is his effort to destroy all these people and anybody else who's opposing him. Then Jesus intervenes at the end of that 70th week, says enough is enough, binds the devil, raises the dead, and then you come into your own as rulers of the world with Messiah. That's the part, I was talking to this good man originally from Bosnia on the phone at length yesterday. That's the part of the gospel which is not clear in churches, right? You are the kingdom. So what sort of people should you be now? This is the key. Don't you know the saints are going to manage the world? Paul said, don't you know the saints? So you can't settle your little squabbles in the church? Come on, folks. Don't you know the saints are going to manage the world? That's the point of Christianity, which we didn't get clear in church. Jesus, in his mercy, God in his mercy, is kind enough to overlook our faults as we repent of them, and to say, I could use this person. What sort of person is this? How honest is this person? How faithful are they? Ooh, a man after God's own heart. Remember that? David was one that God selected. I think I see God here looking around at all these trillions of human beings he has to deal with. Hey, here's a person I could use. Let's work with him. David made the most catastrophic mistakes, you know that, one particular one. Unbelievable mistake. Murder and adultery? Ghastly. However, there was something in David that God still liked. He was a man after God's own heart. So I see the Christian faith. One has to say this because people don't know it. A selection. Talk about election. You are elect. Whether you like it or not, you're the elect, right? Selected to rule the world with Jesus when he comes back. Masses of verses on that.
Just,
Yeah, we have some
What do you got? Some comments?
questions
Yes,
on
please.
the internet.
Great.
Somebody's saying, I see no reason that Europe, wait a minute, did I miss? No, other words, this person thinks that the fourth kingdom is Rome.
Yeah.
This
And
Lord not.
making.
Okay. Yeah, that's been the traditional view. One of the points against it is that Babylon is the center of these kingdoms. And Nebuchadnezzar, Medo-Persia, Greece, Alexander was at Babylon. They restored Babylon on the basis of the king of the north. So we would ask this person, how do you understand the king of the north? That doesn't sound like the west to me. That's the logic of it, for what it's worth. But anyway, Europe could certainly be involved, who knows. We were always looking for 10 kings, you see, in Europe, remember that? And it was 10, then it's 14, back to 8, and now it's there. So that hasn't worked out so far. It still could. So one has to
I think part of her
Yeah.
things
Vicky?
that Herod set to kill Jesus, and that he was, you know, Roman, but he was really Jewish.
He was actually an Edomite.
Herod was.
He was an Edomite. He was from the enemies. He wasn't a European, certainly. The
What?
Pope was certainly European.
Wasn't that a Jew? Wasn't Herod a Jew?
He was an Edomite by birth.
That's not a Jew.
Not a Jew. No, Edom is not Israel. Edom is not Israel.
Because it says here he's the descendants of Jacob's brother Esau.
Yes,
Or-
Esau.
or-
Esau.
Or
Esau.
an Edomian.
Yes, Edom, absolutely.
Well,
Edom.
Jacob was a Jew, right?
Jacob is what we would call a Jew,
So
roughly.
Esau
Yes.
was his.
Well,
Esau's not. These are the enemies. No, it's a different nation. Somehow they got. Tom maybe knows this. How did they manage to get an Edomite king in there
Right.
over them?
That's weird.
That's interesting.
I
Well,
thought
he
it
was
was
appointed.
What?
He was appointed.
Appointed by Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
Well-
it was.
His father was Antipater,
Yes.
it says,
Mhm.
who founded the Herodian dynasty.
Fine.
So the Romans installed this guy.
Yes, they did.
yeah, they
Although
didn't
he wasn't a
particularly
Jew.
care
He
what
was
his
not a
name
Jew.
was
That's a
exactly.
good
And the
point.
Jews didn't mind. I mean, Jews usually mind that sort of stuff, didn't they?
He was really like a Samaritan.
Yes.
Okay.
Good point. It's
So
great.
that's why they didn't have much issue at the time, the Jews. I mean, they would have rebelled if a non-Jew is governing over them.
They didn't. They were wise enough not to, and that's why they were terrified that Jesus might produce a revolution. You know, the Messiah becoming king. All of that's interesting. But so he is an Edomite, and the king of the West is not really the same as the king of the North. So the challenge to that system is, granted that Europe could be full of bad things, that's all entirely possible, but specifically here you have to deal with the king of the North as the final bad guy. And if you just look at chapter 12, verse 15, 12 verse 11, verse 12 verse 11, no, 11:45, let me get this right. Verse 45, chapter 11, he, this king of the north, will pitch his tents, his royal pavilion, 11:45 of Daniel,
Are we getting there?
we'll get there, sees, and just to make the point, in answer to Lorna here, the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end in the Middle East there, and nobody helps him. You tie that one in with Daniel 9:26b, that's to say 11:45 is linked to 9:26b, where it says the evil prince comes to his end. An essential point in the Hebrew there, not clear in all of your translations. He comes to his end. That's 9:26b, linked to 11:45. This bad guy comes to his end, his death. That will not work for AD 70 and Titus. This is a very significant point. It might sound a little technical, but the Calendar Leech commentators and many other people make this quite clear, that Titus did not come to his end in the events of 70 AD. He died a natural death 18 years later. Titus did. That's why the prophecy, I think, will not fit 70 AD, quite apart from the fact that if AD 70 is the Great Tribulation, how long has this been going on for? Because the key verse in all your prophecy discussions is 24:29 of Matthew. Matthew 24:29 says, immediately after the Great Tribulation. Immediately. And people said, well, maybe it means suddenly. No. Not suddenly, some distance, no. This is absolutely a fixed chronological marker. Immediately after the Great Tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and then they will see the Son of Man coming. See? That won't work for AD 70. Unless you're going to say the Great Tribulation has been going on for 2,000 years. That's why we go to Olive Garden and we say this is not the Great Tribulation. There's more point to that than the silliness as it may sound. So, the Great Tribulation is future. It's immediately followed by the darkening of the sun, immediately followed by the second coming of Jesus. Our Jehovah's Witness friends got all of this messed up because they said all of this happened in 1914, right? Talk about chaos. Talk about governmental chaos sometimes. Talk about theological chaos. The Jehovah's Witnesses were taught that 1914 was the date at which Jesus came back. And earlier in 1844, the great disappointment. William Miller said in 1844 he's coming back. So I'm afraid that Bible study is littered with failed attempts to get this right.
If I can add, in your commentaries, you will read a lot about how during the Maccabean period,
Yes.
with Antiochus did set up apparently
Certainly.
a statue of Zeus,
Absolutely.
the god
No
of Greek, on the altar apparently, and he did all kinds of things that
Yep.
would point to that. But the text you just mentioned, in Daniel 11:45,
Yep.
doesn't
Doesn't work.
fit Antiochus either. Or what we just read about him invading the south.
Right, doesn't work.
Antiochus never invaded, was never successful. He was not a successful general.
Antiochus is 2nd century BC, just to get your feet clearly in place here, get your data clear. 2nd century BC, there was a Syrian tyrant who was certainly a forecast of the Antichrist. He's a terrible wicked guy. He had women with their dead babies slung around their shoulders, marching up and down. I mean, this is a Hitlerite person par excellence. This is 2nd century BC. He put a statue of himself, a pagan altar, into the temple. He's certainly a forecast of the Antichrist, but he's not the Antichrist because Jesus is speaking of a future Antichrist.
And he didn't destroy the temple.
He didn't destroy the temple, he did corrupt it, he didn't destroy it, so he didn't also die in the land as 1145 says he must. So with that outline, you can begin to think through all of this picture.
Antiochus died most probably
Yes.
near Babylon
Yes.
on his way back to the Judea. But
Trying to pillage another temple. These guys were into pillaging temples because there was a lot
yeah, because he
of
was broke. He was such a bad leader. Yeah, he was. He used to raid the pagan temples for their treasure.
Yes.
And this was after his second
Yeah.
unsuccessful campaign into Egypt.
Yeah.
And that's when
Finally
he died,
does.
apparently.
And the kingdom of God did not come, and the kingdom of God did not come in 1844. A Baptist preacher, William Miller, predicted it. The kingdom of God did not come in 1914, as the Jehovah's Witnesses predicted it. And when they said, well, one
Even if you believe that
generation...
this is Rome, it doesn't necessarily mean you believe that 70 AD was the culmination of all this.
No.
I used to believe this was Rome, and I
Right.
never believed that 70 AD had anything to do
No, that's right. No. We believed in those days in a revived Roman Empire,
Right.
which
And
is
I think maybe that's
possible.
what Lorna thinks.
That's absolutely right. But the king of the north has to be explained too. The king of the north is the final product of this wicked kingdom. Seems more like a Middle Eastern character. But, I mean, these are things which
So
are...
through
of
this.
Yeah.
Where was
What
it?
else?
Lost my page. Verse
Mhm.
22, start talking about this despicable person,
Yes.
mine says,
Right.
and all this stuff, and it says that he will make war with the king of the south.
That would be Egypt.
So he, this despicable person, is
Yeah.
the king of the north.
Yes.
The king of the south, then, there's large armies
Yes.
and all kinds of wars and stuff
Right.
going on.
Right.
But it does sound like they'll actually even scheme together a
Yes.
little bit. But so this king of the south is
Egypt probably.
probably
Ethiopia possibly. But south would not be Syria. South would be Egypt.
Egypt would be more. Right?
Egypt is south.
Yeah,
Yes.
the king of the south would be
Egypt.
an Egyptian.
Yeah.
Can't be Saudi Arabia.
No.
I don't think
Way
so.
further
Egypt,
over.
you got to remember the mortal enemies of the Jews, right?
Yeah.
So you have to look at it in that context
Yeah.
as well, right? So you had Egyptians at the south
Yeah.
and the Syrians on the north.
Syrians on the
So
north.
that was pretty much
Antiochus being a typical
friction.
a type, a foreshadowing. But there's some bad guy coming quite clearly yet in the future who will make a pact with Israel for one final period. Halfway through that, he turns into a beast. Then you get what's called the Great Tribulation, which is unparalleled, and it's based upon Daniel 12 verse 1. What people have done is to read the New Testament without the Old. That's a disaster. Expressly when Jesus said, I'm talking about Daniel's Great Tribulation, I'm talking about Daniel's abomination, and people have said, no, forget that, I'll make it up. That's not wise. It's based on Daniel. So the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24:21, days which in the Markan account says it will be tough for pregnant women. That's not a period of 2,000 years. That's just wrong. It's an extreme time of evil, based on Daniel 12:1.
Doesn't Luke call it the days of vengeance?
Days of vengeance, when all things are going to be fulfilled. And 12:1 is the basis of that, a time unparalleled in human history. And 12:2, sigh of relief, is the resurrection of the dead. Isn't that beautiful? Many of those who are sleeping, multitudes of those who are currently sleeping, that's the sleep of death, will wake up. Some to the life of the age to come. The rabbi said some at a different time. They sensed two different resurrections even there. And if that's in doubt, you can always do Luke 16:16, which says you'll be rewarded at the resurrection of the just. It's not the resurrection of the just and the unjust, because that unjust one comes at the end of 1,000 years. That occurred to me just the other day, only because we're dealing with these issues all the time, every day. Luke 16:16 speaks of the reward coming to Christians at the resurrection of the just, not the unjust. When you get to Revelation 20, you have this marvelous statement about some who were beheaded came to life. Let me tell you, that's a literal resurrection. Don't go all floppy on that one and say, well, it's a spiritual resurrection. You're not beheaded when you're converted. Is that clear? Because some systems get in a big muddle there. No, he saw some who'd had their heads chopped off. They came to life. That means they came back to life. That's not hard. And then they began to reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. So if people want to argue, is it 998 years? I don't care. Let's call it 1,000 years. Why not? But the major point is that they begin to reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. At the end of that time, the devil is loosed for a short period of time. And then comes the great second resurrection, the final resurrection, all the rest of the dead. So Revelation 20 verse 5, critically important. Don't let the Jehovah's Witnesses tell you at the door that doesn't belong in Scripture. It does. Revelation 20 verse 5 says, the rest of the dead did not come to life in resurrection until the end of the 1,000 years. Beautiful stuff. All of this is part of Christian hope. All of this is giving you not the cyanide, but the energy of spirit. The more your mind is working like the mind of Scripture, then the more life you should have. Okay, any other questions, points?
I think just to agree with Lorna is that
Yes.
Definitely we're not against some kind of European
No.
Roman influence
No.
on the kings of the south, kings of the north, and so on.
Yeah.
Obviously that goes without saying, but we're talking about the point of origins.
Point right. The king of the north is certainly to be reckoned with. And also in Isaiah 11, we did this before, the 114228 connection. Isaiah 11:4 is quoted by Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2:8. That's the 114, double it, 228 connection. Critically important. Paul is thinking of the Assyrian when he's thinking of the Antichrist. Once again, the 114, Isaiah 11:4, connected to 228, 2 Thessalonians 2:8. We have to follow where Paul is going there. See, what these writers do is to quote a verse, and you're supposed to know what that's about. They can't quote whole chapters. Think how big the Bible would be if they did. We've made a hash of it anyway, in this Bible, right? So the art is to say, I see, Paul is quoting from this passage. Now let me look at this passage and see what it's talking about. You have to examine the context of it. Okay, all of which is not sort of peculiar, if that's the right word, or individual to the Church of God Abrahamic faith. It's not. I'm giving you what would be classical futurism. Many of the early church fathers would say exactly what we're saying this morning. It's not new, not inventing anything new. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up Lorna's
Yes.
question here, I'll sort of rephrase the question.
Mm-hmm.
How much of what we're reading here in Daniel is past history to you, to your understanding?
Well, that's the issue that I said. I don't know. You can start in chapter 11 at verse 5 and say, oh, that's future. I'm certain that from verse 31 at least it's future. And then if you go back to 21, it's very hard to make a break there. From 21 onwards is future. Why? Because Jesus said it's future. This is a very simple idea. Rabbi Jesus is our teacher. He's reading verse 31 at least, and almost certainly verse 21 as future. He doesn't comment on verses 5 to 20. So that's open.
So we're reading this through the prism of Jesus, obviously, in Matthew 24,
Cool.
so we got to go there and then
Cool.
maybe go back to Daniel.
Jesus is our rabbi.
We should-
And another section could have been, you can make a case that it could have been by world events at the time fulfilled.
You could. You can make a case from
And
verses
it still
5
could
to
be a
20.
type of what will happen
Right,
in the future.
exactly.
Because the whole Bible's filled with
Right.
things in the past that
That's
were
right.
a type of what will
Right.
happen in the future.
Absolutely. I leave that part
But
open.
you're not
so-
making a hard claim
No.
to that.
Yeah,
No,
we're
no.
not saying that, this type of prophecy
Yeah.
has to be predicted for us. It's not prophecy at
Oh,
all.
of
In other
course.
words, the prophecy by nature has to have future
Of course.
things in the future still. If you don't have anything in the future,
Well, you've just denied Jesus flat out, right? Because Jesus gives a whole chapter predicting the future based on Daniel. He talks about Daniel being Daniel the prophet. So if you say that Daniel didn't write Daniel, you have assaulted Jesus. That's why that's so serious. You've taken your fist and punched Jesus in the nose. Don't do it. Jesus is our rabbi, and his teachings then have to be taken as valid.
I have another question.
Yes,
too.
ma'am.
In, say, verse 29, several places here, it talks about this king being enraged at the Holy Covenant and
Yes.
take action and show regard for those who forsake the Holy Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
So is the Holy Covenant, is that Jewish people?
I rather think it is in this
that
context.
us Christians who become?
It's hard to say. My sense is that there is something holy about that temple. God is going to honor that temple. Here's the point. You know that they went to pray in the temple after the death of Christ? Remember that?
Right.
After the death of Christ, they still regarded that temple as a place that you could
well, these events are all about the Jewish temple.
Yes.
Oh, the Jewish temple, in other words, is an intricate part
Yeah.
of Daniel's prophecy and Jesus' prophecy.
Yeah.
So obviously, it doesn't have anything to do with the church as such.
We observe it. We are watching it with
But
great
the
care.
temple is the center
Yeah.
of this prophecy. In other words, the church is obviously affected by these
Sure.
events, but obviously it has to do with the temple, which is controlled obviously by Jews,
so-
not Christians.
It's a great question, though. The Holy Covenant. Why are we calling it a Holy Covenant?
That's just
It's a good question.
they're certainly not saying temple. I mean, the temple's a building.
I think it
This
all
is
has
the
to
Holy
do
Covenant and
with covenant with the
the
juice
covenant
of the
people,
flesh,
covenant
as
people
Paul
is
Yeah.
what I'm thinking. it
Yeah,
means.
probably.
And those
It's
events
slightly
will-
open, doesn't have to be
Right.
decided critically. I think there's certainly a temple. The temple is holy in some sense at that point. I don't know. I'll leave that alone. Wait and
I don't
see.
I
see how
mean, it
this
certainly
is-
makes sense in the future that
Yeah.
some, countries would be ready to fight with the Jews.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're ready
Well,
all the
they're ready
time
now.
to fight with the Jews.
Fight
So-
against the Jews.
So so that's to me, that's the way I take it.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure how we Christians, the
What-
church, fit in with whatever this is saying.
Not sure.
I don't think
I
this is a
don't.
Christian
I'd leave that
covenant.
open.
I don't think this has anything to do
It's a covenant
the
made
church.
with Jewish people, so it's not strictly the new covenant made with us.
Yeah,
That
because
will be
we're,
made.
We're covenant people.
We're covenant people.
Come on.
in a different,
In different
Covenant
sense.
people.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
When you get to the resurrection, of course, we do say we're involved there. Right? Your people are going to be resurrected. We say that's us.
Yeah.
So we do play both
I
angles.
got
on
a
that.
question here from Jay. If the wrong Jesus,
Yeah.
the wrong gospel,
Because these
Yeah.
people don't even have Jesus.
has been preached for 1700 years,
Mhm.
what effect will that have on his second coming? That's-
Well, yeah. I mean, they could accept the Antichrist as Christ. All sorts of possibilities. If that person were to sit in a place and say he's God, claiming to be literally God, I don't think Paul meant that. There's ambiguity in language. Let me be quite clear. There's some things in the Bible where you say, yeah, maybe. That's fine. We'll wait and see. Paul says the Antichrist is going to claim to be God or a God. Entirely ambiguous. Nobody in his senses really claims to be God. That's pretty wild. claiming to be a divine figure of some sort in a temple is entirely possible. If you say that's a Trinitarian person claiming to be the second member of the Trinity, then a Trinitarian might say, yes, that's great, I love it, right? So it might be wise to know who God is. But beyond that, these are hugely speculative questions. How has God viewed all the sincere people who've worked at these doctrines not quite right, as it seems? I don't know that. I do always fall back on the sliding scale argument. John 15. Nobody seems to use this. Why not? Jesus said, John 15, twice he said, if I had not come and told you, you wouldn't be guilty. So we are guilty according to what we could reasonably understand. I see that. I'm not going to make any judgments. Don't ever say all Catholics are wrong. Don't even go there. Don't make those sort of pronouncements. It doesn't make friends. I just don't know. I do know, though, if you want to take the worst case scenario, you do Matthew 7:21 when he says, beware of fake clergy. Multitudes will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, listen, look at our choir, look what we did, we preached. And then I'll turn to them and say, I never recognize you. That's the worst case scenario, right? And the art is to obey Jesus, which is strangely missing from these systems, because they only talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus, which is absolutely essential. They don't seem to concentrate on the words of Jesus so much, right? Now, that's the danger we're trying to avoid. But God will make those judgments. I always say to the students, do not ever say, well, all exile are lost. Who knows what they might do tomorrow? I don't know that.
I think to Jay's question
Yes.
here, I would say that what effect has a wrong Jesus, a wrong gospel? Well, it obviously has impeded the
Yes.
gospel from being
Absolutely.
preached.
Yes, with
And the things pertaining to Jesus, Acts 8:12.
Yep.
And then if you go to Matthew 24, where it says these things have to be done to the ends of the earth, and then the end will come.
It's
I
certainly
think it
impeded.
has affected it perhaps
Certainly.
in that way. It has sort of
Sure.
stalled.
It spoiled it in some way, right. At worst, it got you and me kicked out from the system. Some of us got burned at the stake, right? That's not a good idea, as a Christian, to burn other Christians at the stake. On the other hand, the other side of this coin is the following fact. There's a mass of non-Trinitarian, anti-Trinitarian literature. Not explicit. People don't necessarily write books and say Jesus was not a Trinitarian, as plain as that. But if you read, and you don't read, and I'm not blaming you for not, you can't read all this stuff. But if you look at liberal scholars, particularly, so-called liberal scholars, they are fully aware of the fact that Jesus was not God. They know that. Masses of folk out here. Public doesn't know it. For instance, the Archbishop of Canterbury, in charge of 78 million Christians in his time, he says Jesus never claimed deity for himself. What? Supposing that's right. Didn't go around saying, I'm God.
Apparently only John knows that, the gospel.
Well, that's what Ramsey said and others. I come across them all the time. Jesus did not claim to be God. Most scholars know that, right?
I was watching I was watching Bart Ehrman,
Yes.
who I know is an enemy. He's one of the
He's an
worst
agnostic
of
now.
the worst. I don't support that, obviously.
Yeah.
But he has some good things to say.
He does.
A broken clock is right once a day. He
Twice a day.
Twice a day. Twice a day. Please.
So he has
So he's wrong.
So he's debating a lot about how Jesus became God. That's always the
This
question.
is our subject.
And obviously, as a now agnostic, but he says things like New Testament scholarship
Yeah.
knows, and you can ask anyone, that the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke,
Yes.
do not teach Jesus is God.
Absolutely.
It's only John
Yeah.
that does that.
Something.
And then he asked his opponent, so why, if Jesus is God, right, that's a big thing Jesus should have made clear,
Yes.
So why is it that out of the 4 Gospels, only the 1 and not the 3?
Right.
So in other words, the minority. So, this
He's
is
raising questions that we like. I mean, I love that. I love this question. Make people think. Anything to get them to think. Anything to get them not to go to church mindlessly and recite creeds they don't even understand. I don't think that's healthy at all. Okay, so where did we get to?
No idea.
28, I think. We're 28?
28. All right.
32, I think.
32?
32. All right, yes. Who's going to read
By
32?
his deceit he shall make some who were disloyal forsake the covenant,
Yes.
but those who remain loyal to their God shall take strong action.
Right. And one can argue about the covenant, the new covenant as we know
who
it.
those people are.
Right.
Those are Jews who,
This could be Jews who are just not getting it right. Could be Christians who are falling away. You know, anybody who's involved with the covenant, however you take that, had better be careful not to fall for the Antichrist. We could name people in our own group who are now agnostics. They don't believe anything. So we've all got to be on guard here.
Sorry, is
Yeah.
this the covenant that he makes, or
Yes.
a
Oh, well, no,
pre-existing covenant?
no, this would be the true covenant. Whether you interpret that strictly Jews or Christians, doesn't matter. Some arrangement with God, but not the false covenant.
Oh, so it's not the one.
No, I don't think so. That's the true
Sorry,
covenant. Right.
Vicky, 33.
Because the Holy Covenant is in context. Verse 30 is the Holy Covenant. Now, the Antichrist does make a covenant. He makes an alliance back in 23. An alliance is made with him. Daniel 9, he makes a covenant with
Two covenants.
many. Right?
Sorry,
Actually, you've got three covenants. You've got a false covenant. You've got a covenant strictly between God and Jews. And you've got a covenant between God and Christians. You've, in a sense, got three possible shades of that meaning.
Sorry, but in view here is two covenants. The false one, this evil period, and this other covenant that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but there are two here. Yeah, sure. Those who have insight, now that gets more positive. 33. Who has 33?
Okay.
Those who have insight among the people will give understanding to the many.
Yes.
Yet they will fall by the sword and by flame, by captivity and by plunder for
Mhm.
many days.
Got it. 34.
now when they fall, they will be granted a little help, and many will join with them in hypocrisy.
Wow. 35.
And some who are wise will fall victim to persecution. In this way, they will be refined and cleansed and made pure until the time of the end.
Yes.
For the appointed time is still to come.
Okay, this is rather fascinating material. Those who have insight, in 33, will give understanding to the many. That's how you make a Christian. You give them understanding. Without knowledge, people are perishing. In Isaiah and Hosea, they lack understanding. Paul said of his colleague Jews, I admire the zeal, but it's without understanding. He went off to save them, right? So zeal without understanding is a disaster, on those texts at least. So we have then many who have insight among the people will grant understanding. In your margin you put Isaiah 53:11. Isaiah 53:11, perhaps, speaks of the Son of God, the servant of God, giving understanding to many. And making 53:11, Isaiah 53:11, and thereby making them right rather than wrong. You cannot have righteousness without understanding. You can have zeal, I see that, but right here you've got to have understanding. And those who have the insight will be instructing the many, yet they're going to be falling, right? They're going to be martyred, some of them. They're in the thick of this evil time. Some will fall by the sword and flame, captivity. So that would be, I think, the great tribulation for some days. Doesn't say how long, for some period of time. When they fall, they get some help. Right, what else?
It also goes with Daniel 12:3. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the
Perfect.
brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever.
Okay, that's excellent. We've got a hub of 4 verses here. You've got the one she just read, Daniel 12:3, those who have insight. You've got this one, those who have insight. You've got Isaiah 53:11 says that the Son of God makes people right by his insight, by his knowledge. I'm going to add one. If you turn to 1 John 5:20 and add that as a 4th member of your hub of verses to teach you, 1 Peter 5:20 is rather amazing.
John.
Sorry, 1 John, I got that wrong. 1 John 5 and verse 20, we have the following thing. 1 John 5:20. What about this? We know that the Son of God has come and has given us an understanding that we might know the Father, him who is true. And we are in the Father who is true by being in the Son, Jesus.
Right.
That's quite easy,
Easy?
provided you don't want to contradict the rest of Scripture. I'm getting to the point, right? Okay, you've got one verse. What about 31,000 verses which say the opposite? Have you thought of that? Anyway, isn't that great? I want to tell you, as the commentaries say, that word diania in Greek is the strongest intellectual word. Is it clear? You've got to be thinking. Don't give me this mushy, well, I just... No. Jesus has come to give us an understanding. This takes work. This takes study. It takes engagement with this.
It takes teachers
Teachers.
and scribes. He
And
says, I
of
will
course.
send you teachers and scribes.
Absolutely.
This subject of reminds me of, I don't know if it's a sort of warning in Revelation 13:18.
Yeah, what does that
When
say?
he's talking about the beast.
Mm-hmm.
Let the one with understanding
Yes. Good.
solve the meaning.
Yeah,
of
the
the number
666,
things
right?
of prayer. So
Yes.
Mm.
Work
it's
it
an
out.
interesting.
It is.
sort of-
666.
So you better have, and it goes with Jesus, hear and understand
Absolutely.
about things like in Matthew, I think he says, whoever has ears, let
To
them
hear.
hear, so you
Let
can
them hear.
understand what,
Of course.
so you can be
Yes.
in the know when
In the know, I
when
like
these
that.
things come.
In the know. And you look at the current election, look at the energy that goes into the election, right?
Money.
Are these people engaged intellectually? You bet they are. They're arguing every point. How well are Christians doing? Who are the elect, with the only message that really amounts to anything in the long term. So we have to be engaged in this. One way to do it is on the internet. You can go on the internet 2 or 3 hours a day easily. Type in 1,000 Googles about, is Jesus God? What's the Trinity? What's the kingdom? What's the gospel? You can engage the comments there. First time you do it, it feels strange. The 1,000th time you've done it, it feels like regular life.
The 4 hub verses, they want the 4 hub verses.
4 hub verses. Hub is Sean Finnegan's idea of putting a cluster of verses.
And these pertain to the word understanding.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Mhm. In 11:33,
Yeah,
And
give
then-
them again for us.
then Isaiah 53:11,
53:11,
Daniel 12:3,
12:3.
and 1 John 5:20.
They go together well. And then the other ones that Carlos mentioned in passing, Jesus keeps saying, if you've got ears to understand this, for goodness sake, understand it, right?
Yeah, but anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. That's a paraphrase of Matthew 11:15.
However, those who have this understanding and give insight to the many,
Yeah.
yet are not necessarily protected.
They're not.
They will fall by the sword and
Mhm.
flame.
It's a good point. Some will be martyrs, if it's your lot to be
Some will fall
martyred.
in order to refine and
Correct.
purge them
So what?
and make them pure.
That's right. It's a great comment. So in the Great Tribulation, if you are not needing to be tribulated to prove who you are, you can escape.
You make better when you're killed.
That's what it says.
And even if God wants you to be a special martyr, then you get martyred. Some of those, Luke clearly says, Luke's reporting Jesus, clearly says, some of you are going to get martyred. Others will escape totally, flee to the hills, right? Others are so feeble and so weak and so terribly tepid that they're going to have to prove themselves up to the point of martyrdom. I see that. As the Philadelphia church is doing well. Because you kept my word, the gospel, and not denied my name, all the things to do with Jesus, I will keep you from that great time of tribulation. You're going to escape. Whether it be in Becky's basement or whatever.
But these teachers right here, not necessarily in last space.
I mean Vicky's basement. So some of the teachers are, you can't decide who in advance is going to be martyred and who isn't.
So how,
Revelation 2:10 says, "Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the
Right.
devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so
Yes.
that you will be tested, and you
Yeah.
will have tribulation for 10 days.
10 days.
Be faithful until death. I'll give you a crown of life." That's in talking about the Church of Ephesus.
Absolutely.
No, Smyrna.
That's probably a historical one. There was a period of 10 and 8. Well, anyway, doesn't matter.
So how are we refined by dying?
Oh, absolutely.
How are you refined
You're
by
refined by time because you are strong enough to go through
Die.
death. It's a huge refining, isn't it? You've proven your character. Your character is tested like gold when you die. It's not the actual moment of death that tests you, obviously, but you're willing to give your life for Christ. It's huge testing. The test is on until you're dead, then you can't be tested, I get
Well,
that.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff, isn't it?
You want to
Where are we?
the chapter before? Or-
Yeah, what else? You got some other comments there?
Yeah, we got to 36.
36. We should do this, though. The king. Let me read 36 instead of 37. The king, this is the final king of the north, will do as he pleases, will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will speak monstrous things against the God of gods, and will prosper until the indignation is finished. For that which is decreed will be done. 37.
He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers, or for the desire of women, nor will he show regard for any other god, for he will magnify himself above them all.
Instead, he shall give glory to the God of strongholds, a God unknown to his ancestors. He shall glorify with gold, silver, precious stones, and other treasures.
Right. 39.
He will take action against the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. He will give great honor to those who acknowledge him, and will cause them to rule over the many. And he will parcel out land for a price.
Okay, let's stop there and leave the rest, the awful rest of it, for another week. These things obviously are spoken of the final Antichrist. Paul is quoting this material in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, which we also next week should read. This is the warning against pride. Undue pride, isn't it? You are not going to succeed by thinking you're the best in the field. That's dangerous. Show no regard for the gods of what exactly this is people have written, and the on this, but he magnifies himself above them all, honours the god of fortresses, some sort of war god, I suppose, whom his fathers even, his ancestors didn't know that. Whatever that means in detail, we'll have to wait and see. Take action against the strongest of fortresses with the help of a foreign god. I'm not sure what all that's about, I'll tell you. What do we think? Give great honour. What about this? He's playing God here. He gives honour to those who love him and parcels out land for them. He's playing God. He's playing God and Jesus there, giving them land and causes them to rule over men.
The
Yeah.
God of fortresses
Yeah.
with gold, silver, costly stones.
Yes. Tons of money involved. And then it gets worse from 40 onwards. We're dealing with the end of the Antichrist. He comes to his end in 45. That's key, right? 11:45, 926b. You have it in your notes there.
My note says Antichrist will have no respect for religion or religious heritages.
Right.
The phrase does not mean that Antichrist must be a Jew.
Yeah.
He will be unkind, cruel, and inhumane.
Yeah.
His God, in quotes, will be military power and activity.
Yes. Right. Doesn't have to be Jewish. Although if he's claiming to be a Messiah, you think he would have to. I mean, all sorts of questions here which are fun to talk about.
Actually, he cannot be a Jew. Right? He cannot.
Well, it's the other argument to that one is that if he claims to be the Messiah sitting in the temple, then he has to be a Jew. So you can play with that too.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. That's
Cancels each other out.
whatever. Wait,
No, we don't agree with that.
no.
Well, we got to remember, these Jews, though, are selling out. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of Jews
Some
are
of them,
selling out, so
absolutely.
they'll probably let off.
Right.
That's fine, as long as we've got
Right.
a temple or whatever.
There's lots to speculate in Scripture about on these
Can I
things.
just remind people of 5 p.m. if you want
Yes.
further
Mhm.
further Bible studies?
Yeah.
Someone made a comment earlier about giving you what's it called? Saying Anthony's great because he's some about. Anyway, yeah, it was a very nice comment about Anthony, how it's encouraging to see someone. Oh, no person today is better equipped. This is from Daniel Shaw, very nice.
Oh, yeah.
No person today is better equipped or doing more to argue for the truth. So we have a lot of things we do now, a lot of Vet Fridays,
Absolutely.
Q&A. Now we have this extra to equip the
Yeah.
saints,
Yeah.
so we can also
Yeah.
go out.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should all
So that's
do what
what
we
we-
can.
Yeah.
Circumstances play a large part in all of this, don't they? What shoes did you happen to be born in? What were the circumstances that made it possible for you to work at a job like this? And most people cannot do that. It's no blame. We're all doing different stuff. I see that. Actually, what we're doing is not inventing anything new. The public doesn't know that because they don't know the books. I don't blame them. They cannot possibly know all of the history here. But what we're saying here is basically what they said in the 2nd century, the classical pre-mill people, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Lactantius, and many others. And throughout history, on the unity of God, many brave souls who died for that belief, as long as we're grateful.
And all the church fathers, as far as I know, were futurists.
Many church fathers, absolutely.
I mean,
Right.
is it only up to Augustine where it starts?
No, well, Origen loses it.
Origen.
Once you get to Origen, you go into
Fourth
spaciness. Yes, Augustine is the ultimate problem. for
But
us.
all in all, even they were clear that these things were in the future.
Yes.
And if you
Yes.
believe that every bit of this, including the very last one,
Yeah.
which we believe is in the future,
Yes.
the very last of the
Yes.
kingdoms, if you believe that it already all happened, then you wouldn't really even care.
That's right.
I mean, why even read this stuff? It's like a bunch of
That's
hard to figure
Well,
out.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's
I've
exactly
asked
right.
that question, and it's just like history books. You know, you got.
A lot of people
you
just
should
don't
know-
like it. They don't care. They
Right.
don't care about now, today, and what's going on.
Right. But the teachers who have that preterist view, they just, oh, well, it's good history, you go back to it and, read up and.
I think they're anti-Christ because Jesus was clearly a futurist.